All right. All right. Well, welcome everyone. We are discussing our draft firearms business zoning bylaw tonight. So tonight we will just review the purpose of the bylaw, some highlights of the proposed use, some of the main components for it. And then we'll review the allowed locations that are being proposed for the use, and we'll end with a period to hear back from you all, the board, and any residents on the call, any questions you might have or feedback for us as we continue to work on the bylaw. So why consider this bylaw? So currently, Stowe does not have a firearms business use included in its zoning bylaws, which means that a retail operation could open up in the business district, gun manufacturing could begin in the industrial district, and there really is not a specific guideline or specific guardrails that are up for what the use could look like. So zoning is a tool that controls the use and form of land development. And this process of creating a new zoning bylaw allows the planning board and residents to consider where in Stowe these uses should be located. So we know that we cannot prohibit firearms businesses, though Stowe can look to establish where and how they operate. So the purpose of the bylaw is to establish reasonable criteria for firearms business, for firearms businesses to operate in Stowe, to address concerns of residents, to regulate the process of citing a firearms business use in Stowe, and to minimize any adverse impacts. So how did we get to this point? Stowe has had a retail firearms shop in Lower Village, and has learned from other towns' experiences of this type of use. The board also received a citizens petition through the 2023 special town meeting last fall, which asked the board to prioritize this zoning process. So it feels like there is momentum in Stowe to act and to regulate this use through zoning. So the planning board first reviewed a draft firearms business bylaw in November and has been working in the time since to gain feedback from our police department and our town council. And at this point, we're hoping to gather additional comments prior to bringing a draft bylaw forward to annual town meeting this May. So I'll walk through a few of the main components of the bylaw. So the bylaw sets out a number of definitions. So all of these definitions are aligned with the state's terminology. So we have ammunition, firearm, firearm accessory, firearms business use, and gunsmith. I'll just read the definition for the firearms business use, as this is really the heart of what the bylaw covers. So this is any retail or wholesale operation involving the purchase or sale of firearms or ammunition, the sale of firearm accessories, any retail or manufacturing operation involving the repairing, altering, cleaning, polishing, engraving, bluing, or performing of any mechanical operation on any firearm, the sale of conversion devices such as an auto sear, fuel filters, solvent filters, trigger switches, and or similar products that when combined create a firearm. So this is what we're talking about with this bylaw. The bylaw also creates location requirements. So in the draft bylaw, this use is allowed only within the industrial district. And we'll go over this in greater detail. We'll show some maps in the second half of this presentation. So the firearms business uses must be located 500 feet or more from the residential district, from residential uses, places where children congregate, such as schools, parks, or playgrounds, churches or other religious organizations, and trail networks. The draft bylaw also limits firearms businesses to one per lot. The bylaw also establishes a special permit process. So this clarifies the information that is provided to the planning board ahead of a public hearing to consider the firearms business use. This aligns with state laws and regulations regarding firearms licenses. And there are mandatory conditions that are written into the zoning bylaw, though the planning board will be able to place further reasonable restrictions, such as hours, screening, operations and security, signage, and lighting. The permit would be valid for 1 year, at which point the permit could be renewed. The business would be subject to an annual inspection, and all state and federal licenses would be required to be maintained. The permit also would be granted to the business owner rather than the property owner. So it's non-transferable. So let's say there is a firearms business located at one site and they're trying to move out, and another business wants to come into that same location. That new business would also have to go through the same special permit process through the planning board. So that would require a public hearing. Abutters would be notified and welcomed to a public meeting. So the bylaw also establishes a process to revoke a special permit. So the planning board would be able to do this through a public hearing for reasons such as violation of a zoning bylaw, violation of a state or federal law, or the expiration or cancellation of an insurance policy. So it's also, just lastly, important to note that because this is a new bylaw, it does not impact any existing uses or special permit applications that are currently in front of the planning board. So from here, I'll hand it off to Michael to talk more about the firearms business locations.
Great, thank you, Valerie. So I'll be walking everyone through the location requirements that are set forth in the firearm business zoning. So Valerie can advance to the next slide. So in the firearm business zoning bylaw, we have drafted it so that these kinds of uses would only be allowed within the industrial district. And the map that you see on the right of your screen shows the current locations of the industrial district in Stowe. We're not proposing to add an overlay district or to change any of the underlying zoning within Stowe. Instead, we're just proposing an additional use that would be inside the industrial district. I'm going to take you through just a little bit of context of where these parcels are. As you can see on the map, they are highlighted in yellow. So on the next slide, these parcels up here at the north of Stowe, those are made up of the airport, Minuteman Field, and Regency at Stowe. On the next circle, you'll see that these parcels are made up of Bose, Arbor Glen, the villages at Stowe, Radon Technology, and some parcels that are in the cottages at Wandering Pond permit application at the moment. And then towards the bottom, this is in Gleasondale. This is the Perkins Farm, also called Rock Bottom Farm, and the Gleasondale Mill. So these are the three areas that currently are zoned as industrial, but not all of these parcels have industrial uses. So on the next slide, we took away the parcels that currently have a residential use to them. So these parcels like Regency at Stowe, Villages at Stowe, Arbor Glen, those properties used a different type of zoning. They used either a comprehensive permit or an overlay district to allow a residential use in this industrial district. In the draft bylaw, we want to keep these firearm business uses away from residences. So these parcels that are within the industrial district but have residential uses are removed from our analysis. The next step that we did was thinking about the 500-foot buffer. So all of the parcels that are not used as a residential district or not used as a residential use within the industrial district are given a 500-foot buffer away from residentially used parcels or parcels that have places where children can gather, religious institutions, and things of that nature. So as you can see, this yellow area has shrunk in for the center of the parcels that could foster some firearm business district. This map here is based on the current uses in Stowe, but as we know, uses can change, new permits can come through, and other changes in zoning can occur. So kind of keeping this idea in mind, as I mentioned earlier, the plan reviewing an application for the development called Cottages at Wandering Pond. The underlying zoning of those parcels are industrial zoned, but they have the active adult neighborhood overlay district to them, which gives them additional rights that are not associated with all parcels within the industrial district. So when we take out these parcels, the yellow area, again, gets a little bit smaller because those about 6 or 7 parcels that are in that development get removed from it. And that also creates an additional 500-foot buffer since those parcels would have a residential use. So on this next slide, you can see this would be the kind of the output of the areas where firearm businesses could locate within, we're just saying the active adult permit for cottages gets approved. This could be the area within, just say, a year or so that firearm businesses could locate. And I believe that is it for me. So Valerie and I will open it up to discussion. And we're happy to answer any questions you may have about the bylaw or the mapping.
Don?
Yeah, I just have 2 questions. The first one is, given the residential uses in some of these industrial zones, and I know there's some other rules around crossing zones, but so would it be acceptable to cross through the residential use area of the industrial zone to get to the part of the industrial zone that might have the gun shop?
Yes, the way it's written now, you would be able to do that. Yes.
Okay. Because if you couldn't, then I think we'd probably block just about everything out.
Exactly. That's true. So the bylaw looks at where the building would be within the lot.
Okay.
So you would be able to be potentially a little more creative of where you place a driveway or a road to get in there.
Okay. And can I
Yes.
ask a second question?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So I'm glad, I think the police chief is on. So I understand why the police department would not want to approve a security plan because it's really up to the business to define the security plan. But I certainly hope they would provide some review and comments on it. But my real question is, I mean, when we do other permits, like we have our town engineer that looks at, erosion control and stuff, but nobody on the board is a security expert. So what would we do to maybe other than the police chief, to get some real, review of those security plans? Or maybe the question is, do we have to?
Yeah, I think that is a fair consideration. And I'll offer a few things. So number one is that I can always check with council to see if there are other towns that might require some sort of operations and maintenance or security review. I'm imagining this as it's a very different use, but somewhat similar to how technical bylaws were around adult use of marijuana. And there are, in Stowe's current bylaw for that use, we're also looking at security plans and surveillance and making sure that operations are safe. So I think that there are ways of ensuring that we have some review over that side of the business plan. But I can always follow up with council to see if there's another town that might, show that it's possible to have a peer reviewer in terms of security. But through my conversations with the police chief, and chief, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but our process is really running parallel with the state licensing and local review as well. So I have seen that we are really making applicants look to the Mass General Laws, Chapter 140, and making sure that they are aligning with each of those types of license requirements. So I'm hopeful that because there is more to this type of review than this local process, that there could be more that we can understand.
Okay.
All right. Any
Okay.
other planning board member questions or comments before we jump to the public? Debbie?
Sorry, I get too many things going on here. Valerie, what's the definition of a lot?
So a lot is quite similar to a parcel, but a lot doesn't necessarily need to be buildable. So it's really any privately or a parcel that is vacant or unbuildable, even you could kind of think of it as a parcel.
So if we go back to the map
Yeah.
that showed Minuteman, yeah, those three,
Yep.
or even go to the smallest one.
The
because
smaller.
That's right, because when you filter everything out, though, see the small, I guess the next one. Right, are each of those a lot? Are they multiple lots? Because it's the lot that's now going to define the number of businesses versus the 500 feet, correct?
That is correct. However, the structure of the firearms business would need to be within these shaded areas here.
Correct.
So you're right. So it looks like it is 2 parcels up here. It's just touching this one a little bit. And then it is a Bose parcel, 3 of the parcels off of Athens Lane, as well as 1 parcel in Gleasondale.
So,
yeah.
I'm sorry, so even though the mill, for example, might be large, it's considered a parcel, so only one business can be there?
That's correct.
So is it pretty much, we're now saying there can be at most 3? One at Minuteman, one at, we'll call it Bose, and one at the mill?
People can subdivide to create lots.
Yes.
I'm sorry, what, Lauren?
People can subdivide to create defined lots.
So as long as the lot follows the Stowe rules for what is a lot, right now it's 3, but if they subdivided the mill to some number, then it would be some number.
So to be more specific, the mill is not an eligible location because of its proximity to homes. But the Perkins Farm, for example, could be subdivided to create multiple parcels there. Yeah.
Okay.
So the same thing Minuteman could too, correct? I mean,
That's
Minuteman
correct.
is considered one lot, but that could be
Yeah.
subdivided.
Got it.
That's correct.
Okay.
And currently, without cottages at Wandering Pond being approved, there are other opportunities in this area as well.
So when we talked about in the presentation, each business owner needs to go through the special permitting process. So I have one, and now I'm moving out, and Valerie, you're taking over. You have to go through the special process. Can that only start once you and I have made that business arrangement? Is there a certain timeline? Because I think you might be leery to purchase my business if you're not able to go through the permitting process. So how kind of would that work?
So you're asking if a business is intending to purchase a business from another.
Correct. You're going to
owner.
purchase business from me, for example, correct?
Yeah. So I would say that typically what happens with other permits is that the new owner would try to come forward likely before a purchase and sale has gone through, which which is what we've seen with other business properties.
But the way it's written though, the new owner would already have to have the state and federal licensing before they can apply for a permit. So there's that part of the process they'll have to go through.
Are we gonna get into a chicken and egg? They can't get the permit until they have the license, but they can't get the license until they have a permit?
Well, don't other businesses sort of have maybe a memo of understanding or something that they have an agreement with the current owner that, you know, a sale would go through, and then they have to go through all of their other approvals before they can actually do it.
And Debbie does raise a good point. That is still one question I have remaining, which is, would the business owner be able to get those state and federal licenses before applying? Yes, Debbie, that's still something we're trying to figure out.
And here's a silly question. What does SPGA mean?
The special permit granting
authority.
Special permit granting authority.
authority.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deb.
Planning board ease, huh? It's like, I tried to look for it. It's like, okay. What, do you want to still keep it an overview, Lori, or do you want to get into some specific comments in the actual bylaw itself?
Why don't we take some questions before we jump into the bylaw? Let's start and take questions or comments. So Roy, I know you've had your hand up for a while, and clearly we're familiar with you on this initiative. So go ahead.
Tell him he's muted.
Looking for the unmuted.
Yeah, you're muted.
There we go. That's better?
There you go.
Yep.
Okay. My questions are around, and they might be similar to what you do. And Valerie, I had asked you and you responded. I thank you for doing that. So it's the business that's operating, not the owner of the facility, who gets permitted, who has to get a special permit, right?
That's correct. Yes.
So it's the business that's operating. So if I have, call it any kind of a business, a landscape business in a property, and then a gun manufacturer comes to me and says, well, I'd like to rent you a space. I'm obliged to say, you have to get permitted first as the owner?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to tell the people. Okay, so, and if I don't, I'm illegal.
Yes, that would be
And
correct.
how, and it's just gonna be word of mouth that somebody says, hey, there's a gun business there, and sends, I don't know who, the police down, somebody down. Is that it?
I think that is what my impression is. That's typically, when there is a zoning violation. I don't know if the chief would want to speak more to operating a firearms business without a license and what the process might be for his department.
So if someone applied, someone would have to come to my office and apply for a gun shop license.
Okay.
So if they came to me, I would find out what that location is, and based on that, they have to adhere to all the local ordinances and bylaws and zone, all the stuff that we have. So I would take that information and say, reach out to the group in Stowe saying this individual is coming here. This is where they want to put this business. Are there any issues with it? If anyone came back and said, like the planning board came back and said, that's against the restrictions in our bylaws, then I would not issue the gun dealer's license. Now, if they opened it up anyway, the ATF and myself would have very special interest in that location.
Yeah.
And that would be a criminal offense.
So someone would either have to come to you in which you'd say you need to get a special permit, or if they didn't come to you, somebody'd have to blow the whistle on them.
So again, I would be checking with the planning board. It's or actually every town department to make sure that everybody's okay with me issuing that, to make sure that there are no concerns that I'm missing something.
Yeah,
So, I mean, if someone's operating illegal business in town, or that has to do with firearms, then, I mean, we'd have to do a criminal investigation on that.
yeah. Okay, it just felt a little strange. To me, it would have seemed like a location would have had to get the permit, i.e. the owner would have to get the permit and then make sure that his businesses compliant, any rental persons would have to comply.
On my end, all they need is like a brick and mortar location that adheres to all the requirements within a town.
Yeah.
So they may not, it goes back to one question that was earlier, they may not have secured their rental agreement, they may not have secured all that. To me,
Yeah.
it's gonna be out of that location, and I would still issue that
Yeah.
license, or those
Yeah.
3 licenses.
Yeah, but it would be difficult if they were in there. So for example, as
No, if they were in there and they were operating a gun shop without a license, then that would be a reason to get a warrant and to shut them down and to take all their property and to file criminal charges.
yeah,
So it'd be very easy to get in there if it was running
once you know
illegally.
about it, once you know about it. So for example, I could have a
I'd like to
building.
think we have good police officers that would know about it.
Well, it's good to know, but I know that people can tie up properties in courts and also other things. So if I'm an owner of a building, I could say I'm gonna have 6 artists come in and create 6 spots for artists. And then once, and I wouldn't need a special permit. Is that right?
It depends where you are.
Yeah, well, depending on where I was. But if I complied for artists, I could put those artists in there. And then if all of a sudden one day, somebody came to me as the owner and said, hey, I'd like to have 6 months and make ghost gun parts. Am I liable, or the owner that wants to make the ghost gun? Am I, as the owner of the building, liable, or is it the ghost gun manufacturer?
I would think that it may be both would be liable, because the property owner could be seen as working knowledgeably towards something that is illegal.
Yeah.
And
You
I'll
could
just say that I
definitely-
think that
I'm
sorry,
I'm
that just
go
that we feel that working with a business owner more directly than a property owner is beneficial, because the business owner is going to know exactly how that business is going to be used. And a couple of the things the planning board is looking at for special permits will be much more understood by the individual operating a business rather than just a property owner.
Okay, I could go on and on, I think. But you understand my point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I gotta tell you, if you sell a firearm that has no numbers on it, that is illegal. So you're
Yeah.
conducting illegal activity.
Yeah,
So if they're gonna conduct illegal activity, I would make the assumption in the leap that they're not gonna be doing it in a commercial business space. If they're gonna do just what you said, just to create those 6 firearms.
yeah. Okay.
All right,
I did have one other question.
sure.
Which deals with so a corollary is that after 1 year, if the business is up by the airport legally and the business changes hands or somehow leaves town and some other firearms business came in, then they would have to comply.
They would need to go through the public hearing process.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in the interim, is there any provision? I thought that the first draft that I read, I thought there was a provision that was like, I'll call it anti-grandfather. So that when you, after, anyone that was in there now, anyone, if someone got a permit in one of the yellow areas now, and then it became, the bylaw went through, the bylaw would apply.
So right now, as soon as they change business ownership, the special permit that was given is no longer valid, and the new owner has to come for a new special permit.
Okay, under the then prevailing regulations.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm with you.
All right, let's move to Mark Borges.
Hi, Mark Forbes, White Pond Road. Just a couple observations and kind of odd questions. It's a 500-foot buffer that is required away from any residential person or anything like this. My question is, if we're going to notice to abutters, does that mean typically the abutters list is 300 feet away? Does that mean nobody gets notified?
No, that's a good point. No, it does not, because the buffer is from the buffer for the bylaw is from the building to the property line, but the buffer for an abutters notice is property line to property line. So it would be wider, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It does.
Okay.
These businesses, though, they're usually kind of stuck away like the mill is and stuff like this. But it'd be, I don't know who came up with the 300 feet, but it would be, could that be raised? Is that something that could be done to 500 or 1,000 feet or whatever in this in an industrial zoned area? Or is that something else?
Talking about the abutter notification, Mark?
Yes.
So the abutter notification.
Yes.
I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to look into that.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And the other thing I got question is that if I have a 10 acre lot and my house sits in the middle of it, I got more than 500 feet around me. Can I have an in-home business as a gun dealer? In-home business?
Not
No.
because it's an industrial zone.
No, you can't. You can't have your residential home address. I cannot issue a license
Okay.
for that.
Okay, and just a
So
question. I know.
you wouldn't get it through me. So,
It's just, there's a lot of in-home businesses. I figured I'd ask. Thanks.
yep.
Right, let's go to Rumel.
Hello.
Hello.
So my question is, within each of these yellow spots that are the industrial zones, how many lots are they, or are they each one lot?
So each of these, so I'll go with this map because it's a little more authentic about where businesses can actually locate. But here, so it looks like there's 2 parcels that are impacted to the north. To the south, it's just 1, and then to the west, it is 4 right now.
But I'll just reiterate that doesn't mean that lots can't be subdivided. So I think Valerie is quoting what the current ownership and defined lots are, but that doesn't mean that those can't change.
Okay, I guess I'm asking because I'm looking at the bylaw, page 5, section 8.11.5. 5G is I think it's the only line in this entire law that says there shall only be one firearms business use allowed on a lot. So that means in theory, we could still have however many lots you said. We could have that many number of gun shops. Currently, if there's 5 lots, let's say we could have 5 in Stowe, or if they're subdivided, we could have 10. Is that right?
That's correct. So we are looking at a couple of other bylaws that have been accepted by the state's AG because we really want to make sure that the bylaw that we pass at town meeting will also pass with the state. So there aren't many options or many templates for us to really look at. So there is the option of doing this 500-foot buffer from uses. There is one other town that has opted to not do the 500-foot buffer, but instead limit to 2 businesses allowed per for the whole town. So the planning board looked at that in November or December, and looking at Stowe, I think we felt that the buffer made more sense, so that we can make sure that the locations are further from homes, places where children congregate, etc.
So basically, we could have had this, if the person were to reapply for the Gleasondale mill, he could have the same shops
So-
approved, or maybe he had too many, I don't know.
So the board is unable to talk about the application right now because deliberation has not yet happened. So it's hard to answer kind of hypothetical questions. I will say that if there is for a permit application that has been filed, they would be allowed to locate, wherever they may have chosen. In the future, once this bylaw is passed, we can impact the future uses and future locations.
But for this bylaw, factually speaking, the mill is not in the yellow zones.
Oh, I thought it was that bottom one there.
No, that's
No.
the farm next to the mill.
Oh, okay.
Right. So the mill is actually this smaller. It's only as the size of my cursor.
And that is because of the 500-foot buffer.
And all the residences.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess my only concern is that you can still have a lot of gun shops here. I mean, if they go through the proper channels and not doing things illegally, like Roy suggested, some people might be doing. If they're not doing that, then there's still legal ways that you could have a lot of shops here. in theory.
Understood.
Thank you.
So Valerie, I think there's also a buffer, but from one shop to another, from one business to another.
On town council's advice, we took that out to streamline the bylaw. And the board,
Okay.
of course, you can comment on that and let me know if that is not
Okay.
something that you wish.
So that-
Instead, we replaced it with one per lot.
Okay,
So
Okay.
that's something that the board, we haven't seen or discussed. So that was a change made
Okay.
by town council.
So
Bill Byron?
somebody, we could comment on that to you guys that
Oh, sure,
there should be
Yeah.
some, okay,
sure.
send you an email or something. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Bill Byron?
Is it illegal to limit the number of this type of licenses allowed in town and also enforce a buffer restriction? I mean, can you do both? And if not, why not?
We have not seen a bylaw pass the AG's office with both.
Have you seen one try to pass that?
Not that I know of.
Oh, okay.
It's possible, but not that I know of.
It's just a question. It's just a question.
Yeah. I think it's a good question. It sounds like that's something that we should get verified.
And if there are, of course, it appears to me the big fuss here is the firearms buildings, a business that may or may not go in to our precious mill area near our neighborhood. So I don't know that anyone is fussing over artist spaces. So do you have to permit the owner to have this and then the business goes for a separate permit? Or I don't know if I'm being clear what I'm after here. So that I mean, he can put any number of artists in that building from my point of view. I mean,
So
does
just
each artist
to
have to go get their own permit of any site?
Just to be clear, the current application at hand really doesn't have anything to do with tonight's bylaw discussion, especially since factually the Gleasondale Mill is not in the current proposed
Okay,
So,
slap me on the wrist. That's okay. I got it. Thank you. Thank you.
but if we just talk generically about, if there were, I think what you're asking is, if something is in the industrial zone and an allowed use in the industrial zone, the business owner comes forward to add that in. I think there are two separate criteria for what constitutes a special permit for the actual site or property versus this specifically is about getting a special permit for the actual firearms business.
Okay. So even if some of these sites could be subdivided into different parcels, is that what the word was? That was
Yes.
spoken to? Okay. So, so if you could get 2 down in the south and 5 in the west and so on, but is it legal for a town to say, yeah, we're going to allow these in, but we're only going to allow 4 or whatever? So, and still enforce a setback buffer. That's all. It's kind of what I'm
Yeah,
getting around here.
I think that that's a question that I can get some more confirmation or clarity around. I would be more comfortable if I got some firmer language from council about that. But again, you know, we, especially under a new administration, it's hard to understand what the current AG might allow or not.
Uh-huh.
And I think in general, we really want this first round to pass the AG right away versus get rejected and we're starting from scratch with another town meeting vote to get something changed. So
Okay.
it is a learning process and sort of a balancing of what we know has passed
So you
versus
go for your buffer first, and then you say, well, we don't want 25 of these in town. Can we then try and revise our bylaw to
Oh, yeah.
restrict it
Yep,
without
absolutely.
pushback from the AG? Because, hey, you already did your bylaw, now you're gonna change the game plan here.
I mean, we don't get flack from the AG for continued changes. It's really just about whether or not the specific changes are accepted.
Yeah, and there will be people who think, yeah, that's too severe, and some who don't care. All right, thank you.
All right, Meg?
Yeah, that was one point I was gonna make is just, this is really critical that we get this squeaky clean and just so it passes the AG. Valerie, I was just gonna ask, people were talking hypothetically about what constituted a lot. Like, just hypothetically, like, explain to people, like, if somebody, like, if I own the Minuteman Field, say, and I wanted as many gun businesses as I could, like, how could I split up my lots to create, I mean, how can I split up my overall lot to create different lots so I could do what I wanted to do?
So someone would need to file a subdivision approval not required plan or a subdivision plan. So it's in order to create separately defined lots. So that is a process through the planning board. The board has a lot more discretion when it comes to a subdivision plan than the A&R. It's hard to say without, you know, being an engineer, how these lots could be divided. But they would need to meet minimum lot sizes, minimum lot requirements. And they would need to have, the owner would also potentially need to include a new roadway. So it is kind of hard to imagine exactly how this might function. But to be To be transparent, you know, the owner of the Minuteman Airfield could potentially look to create a new building, put a road in, look at what another lot could look like. So this is why Lori was saying we're really looking at it based on the current land use, but of course zoning can change, parcels change, and it's important that we are clear about that. I don't know if that really answered your question well enough, Meg.
Yes, I just wanted you to explain when people are asking that question, like just put it somewhere in the ballpark of understanding,
Yeah.
which was fine. Thank you.
All right. John,
Yeah, so stop me if this sounds like I'm getting too close to an open special permit, but so if there was a location that was in an industrial zone and was, you know, meet some of these other requirements and a building there, could several gun businesses located in the same building? Or would that not be allowed? I think it would not be allowed under this bylaw.
That is
it's
correct.
one per lot and the
One per
building
lot.
would be one lot.
Right. Okay.
Bill Byron, did you have another question, or I wasn't sure whether you put your hand up or just forgot to take it down?
Oh, sorry, I forgot to take it down.
Okay. Mark?
Can a building be divided into lots? I mean, if the building is huge, could it be in multiple, could that one building be in multiple lots? Kind of an odd
No.
question, but no, okay, thanks.
No, it would need to abide by side yard setbacks.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
All right, Ramel?
Thank you, and thank you for all the explanations. So just in terms of process, when does this draft law have to be finalized? Like, up until when can you make changes before it goes before the town? Is it like the day before? Or obviously before, you know, when the warrant gets sent, but
Even
Yeah.
after the warrant
Yeah.
is printed, we can still propose changes and really just present the revised wording at town meeting. You've seen that done for many different things. But it's just in terms of process, you know, tonight is a forum just to get general feedback. But we do by state law have to also hold a formal public hearing, which will happen sometime before town meeting. Not sure exactly the date yet. So there's another round of public input, which would be more formally run like a hearing to fulfill the state law. So tonight, I think we're trying to gauge, you know, what the input is. We can make revisions that will make it into town warrant, and then, but even when we hold the public hearing after the warrant is closed, we can still make changes.
thank you.
Okay, there's somebody on an iPad and I don't know your name, so if you want to.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, it's Lucia Carrington. I live on Boxborough Road. So I have a question. You're saying that we'd rather have not control how many gun shops we want in town, but I'm confused. Like, you could have 5 gun shops down at the airport because they can break up their land. I'd rather have only 1 gun shop allowed in town than have 5 on one site. Am I saying that right?
You are, and it's not that. I think there is a desire, and it's reiterated here tonight, but I think there is a desire to control how many. So
Right.
I think ideally we would both control the buffer distance and how many.
Because
But
the airport's up for sale, and if he doesn't sell it to another operator for airports, he could sell the land, and a gun manufacturing company could come in there and break up all the lots and make it a gun manufacturing area because they've got 5 lots now or whatever. I mean, if no one
Understood.
buys that airport and he retires, I wouldn't want that down there. I would want to move. I mean, to be honest with you.
Understood, and I think we're trying to figure out the trade-offs to get the bylaw past the state attorney general. And looking at how likely is it that someone would invest in a subdivision just so they could have multiple gun shops. That
Exactly.
being said, I think based on tonight's discussion, I'm sure we'll investigate more. And again, we're trying, I mean, I think ideally what you're hearing from the input tonight is it would be great to have both. But again, to
You can't
some
have
folks
both. I mean,
input tonight, we really want to be sure that if whatever the town proposes and if the town passes, that we are going to make it past the attorney general.
so
Because
you're
if
saying
we
you can't
don't,
have,
then we won't have anything.
but you're saying you can't have a 500-foot buffer and a control on how many, you have to have either or?
It's unclear right now, and we're trying to take council's best guesstimate, shall we say, based on the precedents that have been set by other towns.
Okay.
So I mean,
And when
again, we'll do more analysis and we'll get some and ask for more input from town council. But again, I think we are trying to make sure that whatever bylaw we put forward and the town, if they pass it, that it will pass the attorney general. Because again, if it doesn't pass the attorney general, then it's equivalent to having no bylaw.
And one other question, what about gun ranges? I've been in the vicinity of a gun range in a residential area, and it was quite far, but it was deafening. If I had to live near a gun range, is that part of this, or
This is not
Can a
part
gun-
of this.
so can a gun range ever come in here? Into any of these parcels?
So
Like,
this
you know,
is, yeah, the bylaw does not currently, it does not cover private gun ranges.
I'm
And
talking about a public one, like on one of these parcels where you get to go there and shoot your gun because you like to practice or whatever. I mean, to be in the background of that is deafening. It's horrible to hear a gun go off, you know.
Understood,
could
and
be-
and I think where Valerie is going is that people can have private ones right now.
You can? How far do they have to be away from people?
Yeah, this,
that's another 500 feet.
Mhm.
I don't know if the chief is still on.
Wow.
Yep, the discharge of a firearm has to be within outside of 500 feet of a
So
dwelling.
anyone who has a permit to shoot a gun can fire a gun in their yard with a permit as long as they're 500 feet from anybody else?
Correct.
Wow. No wonder why we hear gunshots every once in a while around here.
I mean, we can hear
Oh my
gunshots from the
God.
Hudson Rod and Gun
Yeah.
Club, and that's not even in town.
I know, but it'd be a nightmare if it was right in my backyard.
Yeah,
I mean, if I lived that long. I don't know.
Totally understand.
Oh my gosh. All right, well, you're, okay, I'm all done.
All right, Rumel?
Thanks again for letting me speak. I think, despite that one limitation that we're discovering and dealing with, I think there's a lot of things that are in the draft bylaw that are a lot better than when we were before we had something like this, right? Because there's still a lot of rigorous application processes and security verifications you have to do. So that will, that might offset might make it harder for some people to set up if that's what they don't want to see these people set up. But there is now much more of a process than there was 6 months ago. And so I think we're definitely moving in the right direction.
Right, thank you, Rumel. All right, any other questions, comments? Any closing remarks, Valerie?
No, I don't have any other than to say that if anyone has any additional comments that you want to make, please feel free to email them to the planning department. We'll be working on this, as Lori was saying, up until town meeting. We do hope to have a bylaw in the warrant. So stay tuned for more information. I'm taking notes on all these questions and hopefully we'll have more answers the next time we discuss this item. So thank you all so much for your time.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for coming out tonight for this topic.
Thank you
Thank you.
for hosting.